The air conditioning unit above conference room C wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, and I counted each ragged breath, 1, 2, 3, while Marcus Holloway straightened his silk tie and smiled at the dozen faces around the glass table. The ceramic mug in my hands had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but I kept my fingers wrapped around it anyway, letting the leftover heat seep into my palms as he prepared to destroy me. As you all know, Marcus began, his voice carrying that practiced corporate warmth that sounded like honey poured over broken glass. Efficiency isn't just a buzzword here at Meridian Technologies. It's our North Star. I'd been counting more than just breaths lately. 47 days since Marcus Holloway had arrived as our new Chief Operating Officer, 32 policy memos in his name, 18 streamlining initiatives, and now apparently one perfectly orchestrated public execution. The conference room smelled like the industrial-strength floor polish they used on Fridays, that sharp citrus bite that always reminded me of hospitals and bad news. Marcus had positioned himself at the head of the table, where Mr. Kellerman usually sat, our old COO who'd retired to Florida, with nothing but kind words for everyone. Marcus wasn't Mr. Kellerman. "Sarah Chen," he said, and my name hung in the recycled air like smoke. "Could you walk us through your recent performance metrics?" The thing about following rules perfectly is that you start to believe they'll protect you. For 6 years, I'd been the operations analyst who never missed a deadline, never questioned a directive, never made waves. I filed every report on time, attended every meeting 5 minutes early, and kept my head down like a good little soldier. The system would take care of me, I thought. The system was fair. I was about to learn how wrong I could be. "Of course," I said, setting down my mug with a soft click against the glass. "Our Q3 operational efficiency improved by 12% over last quarter, primarily due to the vendor consolidation project I completed in August." Marcus nodded, his smile never wavering. "Yes, the vendor consolidation. Let's talk about that." He slid a manila folder across the table toward me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a steady electric hum that seemed to grow louder as every pair of eyes in the room fixed on that folder. I opened it with steady hands, though my heart was starting to race. Inside were printouts of emails, my emails, but something was wrong with them. "As you can see," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the tone of a prosecutor addressing a jury, "there are some concerning patterns in Sarah's correspondence with our vendors. The first email was mine, dated 3 weeks ago, but the text wasn't what I'd written. Someone had doctored it, made it look like I'd been requesting kickbacks from our cleaning service contractor. The second email was worse, fabricated negotiations with our IT supplier that made me look corrupt as hell. This is..." I started, then stopped. The words felt thick in my throat. "These aren't real." "I'm sorry." Marcus tilted his head like a concerned therapist. "These emails, they've been altered." I looked around the table at faces I'd worked with for years. Janet from HR wouldn't meet my eyes. Tom from accounting was studying his hands. Only Elena Martinez, our facilities engineer, was looking directly at me, her dark eyes narrowed and thoughtful. "That's a serious accusation," Marcus said softly. "Are you suggesting someone in this company committed fraud to frame you?" The air conditioning wheezed again, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. The smart play was to apologize, to take whatever punishment he had planned, to keep my head down and hope it would blow over. The system would protect me if I just followed the rules. But staring at those fabricated emails, watching my colleagues avoid eye contact while Marcus stood there with his practiced concern, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break exactly, more like a lock clicking open. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the return vent cycling on in the adjacent room. Marcus's smile flickered for just a second, like a fluorescent bulb about to burn out. "I see." He gathered the folder back toward himself. "Well, given these allegations of misconduct, I think it's best if we place you on administrative leave while we conduct a thorough investigation." "How thorough?" Elena asked from across the table. It was the first time anyone else had spoken since Marcus had dropped my name like a bomb. "Haha, I'm sorry." "The investigation. How thorough will it be? Because if someone's doctoring emails, that's a cybersecurity issue. I should be involved. Maybe we should check server logs, metadata, that sort of thing." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I think HR can handle the scope of the investigation, thank you." But Elena wasn't backing down. "Server logs would show if emails were edited post-send. Might clear this up pretty quickly. I wanted to hug her. Elena Martinez had been at Meridian longer than anyone except Mr. Kellerman, and she had this way of asking innocent questions that cut through bullshit like a hot knife through butter. She maintained the building systems, tracked every keycard access, and knew more about what really happened in this company than the entire executive team combined. That won't be necessary, Marcus said, his voice carrying just a hint of edge now. Sarah, please gather your personal items. Security will escort you out. The ceramic mug felt heavy in my hands. I thought about setting it down gently professionally, like the good employee I'd always been. Instead, I took a deliberate sip of the cold coffee and smiled. Actually, I'd like to see my employment contract before I go. Excuse me, my contract. Section 12 covers disciplinary procedures. I believe I'm entitled to written notice and a formal hearing before any suspension takes effect. The air conditioning wheezed again, filling the silence. Marcus's practiced smile was gone now, replaced by something harder and more honest. Sarah, I don't think you want to make this more difficult than it needs to be. More difficult for whom? That question hung in the air like incense. Around the table, I could see my colleagues starting to pay attention in a way they hadn't been before. Janet from HR was reaching for her phone. Tom from accounting was looking at me instead of his hands. Even the two junior analysts at the far end of the table had stopped pretending to take notes. Marcus straightened his tie again. Fine. You'll have your written notice by end of business today, but I want you out of this building in the next 10 minutes. Of course. I stood up slowly, still holding my mug. One more thing, though. Who reported these alleged discrepancies? That's confidential. Even from the accused, I looked around the room. Strange how that works. Elena was watching Marcus now like she was taking inventory. Actually, the employee handbook says, Elena. Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. Thank you for your input, but I think we're done here. The meeting dissolved into uncomfortable murmurs and shuffling papers. I gathered my things slowly, deliberately, letting everyone see that I wasn't scrambling or panicking. As I reached the door, Elena caught my eye and mouthed something I couldn't quite catch, but her meaning was clear enough. This wasn't over. The hallway outside conference room C was empty fluorescent lights humming their endless electric song. My heels clicked against the polished linoleum as I walked toward my cubicle, each step echoing off the walls like a countdown. The familiar sounds of office life surrounded me. Keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the distant whir of the copy machine. But everything felt different now, like I was seeing it all through glass. My cubicle sat in the middle of the analyst pool, surrounded by gray fabric walls and the accumulated clutter of 6 years. Photos of my sister's kids, a small succulent that somehow survived the building's terrible lighting, a coffee-stained mouse pad that had seen better days. The normal debris of a working life. I opened my desk drawers one by one, looking for personal items to pack, but my mind was already elsewhere. Those fabricated emails bothered me in ways I couldn't articulate yet. They were too perfect, too obviously corrupt. Whoever had created them wanted them to be found. Rough morning. I looked up to find David Kim from IT hovering beside my cubicle with a sympathetic expression. David was one of those perpetually helpful people who fixed everyone's computer problems and somehow always had extra charger cables when you needed them. You could say that. I pulled out the small cactus and wrapped it carefully in tissues. David, hypothetically speaking, how hard would it be to doctor an email? He glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then perched on the edge of my desk. Hypothetically, pretty easy if you know what you're doing. Change the text update. The timestamp, make it look like it was sent from someone's account. The trick is making it convincing enough to fool someone who doesn't know what to look for. What about someone who does know what to look for? David's expression grew more serious. That's a different story. Server logs don't lie. Metadata is like digital DNA, almost impossible to fake completely. If someone really wanted to prove an email was doctored, they could. Hypothetically, he paused. You okay, Sarah? You look like someone walked over your grave. Before I could answer, Elena appeared around the corner of my cubicle like she'd materialized from thin air. David, perfect timing. Sarah, can I see you in the break room for a minute? The break room was a small space with vending machines, a coffee maker that had seen better days, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Elena shut the door behind us and leaned against it like she was standing guard. Okay, she said without preamble. What the hell was that in there? Marcus showing me the door, apparently. No, I mean those emails. I've worked with you for 3 years, Sarah. You're about as corrupt as a Sunday school teacher. And those emails look like someone trying way too hard to make you look bad. I sat down at the small table, suddenly feeling exhausted. You believe me? Hell yes, I believe you. Question is, what are we going to do about it? Elena pulled out her phone and started scrolling through something. Marcus Holloway has been here 47 days. In that time, he's issued 32 new policy memos, reassigned 6 people to different departments, and somehow found budget irregularities in 3 separate divisions. That's not efficiency, that's a pattern. A pattern of what? Control. She set her phone on the table between us. Look, I maintain the building systems right. Keycard access, security cameras, climate control, all of it. You know what I've noticed since Marcus showed up? Lots of after-hours access to places he shouldn't need to go. It's server room, HR, file storage, accounting, archives. Always late at night, always when the regular staff has gone home. My pulse quickened. You think he's been accessing confidential files? I think Marcus Holloway's building something, and I don't think it's good for any of us. Elena leaned forward. The question is, are you going to fight back, or are you going to let him win? I thought about the fabricated emails, the practiced way Marcus had delivered his accusations, the careful timing of it all. Then I thought about something else, the employee handbook section Elena had started to mention before Marcus cut her off. The handbook, I said slowly. What were you going to say about the employee handbook? Elena smiled, and for the first time all morning, it didn't feel like the world was ending. Section 15, Dispute Resolution Procedures. If an employee believes they've been wrongfully disciplined, they're entitled to a formal hearing with union representation. We don't have a union. No, but we do have an employee advocate program. And guess who's been the volunteer advocate for the last 2 years? Elena Martinez. Elena Martinez, her smile grew wider. And as your advocate, I'd have access to all relevant documentation, including server logs, email metadata, and security footage. The air conditioning kicked on with its familiar wheeze, and I found myself counting breaths again. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like planning. What's the first step? First step is you file a formal grievance. I'll help you write it up. But Sarah, Elena's expression grew serious. If we do this, we're committing. Marcus isn't going to roll over and play dead. He's going to fight back, probably dirty. Are you ready for that? I thought about my carefully ordered life, my perfect attendance record, my belief that following the rules would keep me safe. All of it felt like someone else's story now. I'm ready. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of paperwork and procedure. Elena walked me through the grievance process with the same methodical precision she brought to building maintenance. We drafted my formal complaint, gathered supporting documentation, and submitted it through the proper channels. By lunchtime, I was officially a problem Marcus Holloway would have to deal with. The strange thing about being suspended is how quickly you become invisible. As I packed the last of my personal items, coworkers I'd talked to every day for years suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. The usual office chatter died down whenever I passed. It was like watching yourself become a ghost in real time. But not everyone was avoiding me. As I headed toward the exit, I noticed David from IT lingering by the elevator bank. When I approached, he pretended to be checking his phone. Hypothetically, he said without looking up, if someone wanted to examine email metadata, they'd need administrative access to the mail server. Hypothetically. And hypothetically, if someone was planning to do after-hours maintenance on said server this evening, they might discover irregularities in the logs. I stopped walking. That sounds like it could get someone in trouble. David finally looked at me, his expression serious. Some things are worth getting in trouble for. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped inside. As they closed, I saw David walking back toward the IT department with purposeful steps. Outside, the late September air carried the first hint of autumn. The parking lot was half-empty, sodium lights already flickering on, even though sunset was still hours away. I sat in my car for a few minutes, engine running, trying to process everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee, Elena. I typed back, where, tea. Starbucks on 5th, 1 hour. I drove through familiar streets with unfamiliar eyes. Every traffic light, every storefront, every ordinary detail of my daily commute looked different somehow. Like I was seeing my own life from the outside for the first time. The Starbucks was busy with the afternoon rush, filled with the smell of espresso and the sound of steaming milk. Elena had claimed a corner table away from the windows, and she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a woman I recognized but didn't know well, Mary Santos from accounting, one of the quiet ones who kept her head down and did her job without fanfare. Sarah, Elena gestured to an empty chair. Thanks for coming. You remember Mary? Mary looked nervous, her hands wrapped around a large coffee cup like it was an anchor. I hope you don't mind me being here. Elena thought, well, she thought you should know some things. I sat down slowly. What kind of things? Mary glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward. I handle expense reimbursements for the executive team. Part of my job is tracking receipts, making sure everything adds up. About 3 weeks ago, I started noticing some irregularities in Marcus's expense reports. What kind of irregularities? Dinners for 4 people at restaurants where he was supposedly dining alone. Hotel charges in cities where the company doesn't have offices. Transportation costs that don't match his approved travel itinerary. Mary pulled out a small notebook and opened it carefully. I started keeping track. Elena leaned back in her chair. Mary came to me yesterday. She was worried about reporting it through normal channels. Why? Mary's laugh was bitter. Because Marcus has been very clear about what happens to people who question his decisions. Ask Jennifer Walsh from marketing, or Tom Chen from operations, or any of the other people who've suddenly found themselves reassigned to dead-end projects. The pieces were starting to click into place. You think he's been systematically removing anyone who might challenge him? I think Marcus Holloway is building a power base, Elena said, and anyone who represents a threat gets neutralized. I stared into my coffee, watching the foam dissolve into brown spirals. So why me? I've never challenged him about anything. Haven't you? Mary consulted her notebook. 3 weeks ago, you submitted a report questioning the cost-effectiveness of the new vendor contracts Marcus negotiated. 2 weeks ago, you requested access to historical expense data for a trend analysis. Last week, you asked about the timeline for implementing his new efficiency protocols. Those were just normal operational reviews. Maybe, but to someone who's trying to cover his tracks, they might look like an investigation. Elena pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. This is from the building's keycard access system. Marcus swiped into the IT server room at 11:30 last night, then again into HR file storage at midnight. You know what happened this morning? The timeline was clear and damning. Marcus had spent the night building his case against me, fabricating evidence to support a predetermined conclusion. The realization made my stomach turn. So what do? We build a better case, Elena said simply. Mary has the financial irregularities. I have the security data, and if David comes through with the email metadata, David's helping us. Niwana. David's got his own reasons for wanting Marcus gone. Apparently, our new COO has been pressuring IT to implement some questionable monitoring software, the kind that would let him read everyone's emails and track their internet usage. Mary closed her notebook and tucked it back into her purse. There's something else. Yesterday, Marcus called me into his office, wanted to discuss my workload, maybe transfer me to a different department, said my skills might be better utilized elsewhere. He's trying to move you away from the expense reports. That's what I thought. I told him I was happy where I was, that I enjoyed the work. He wasn't pleased. Elena finished her coffee and stood up. Ladies, I think we need to move fast. Marcus isn't going to wait around while we build our case. Sarah, your formal hearing is scheduled for Monday morning. That gives us 4 days to gather everything we need. What about the weekend? The building's officially closed, but I've got maintenance access. If we're going to do some investigating, that's our window. I felt that familiar flutter of anxiety in my chest. Elena, if I get caught doing what? Maintaining building systems, checking security logs, troubleshooting IT infrastructure? She grinned. Sarah, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know every pipe, every wire, every access panel in that building. Trust me. As we walked out of the Starbucks, Mary caught my arm. There's one more thing. Marcus has been asking questions about you specifically. When you started at the company, who your references were, whether you had any connections to the old management team. It felt like he was looking for leverage. Leverage for what? I don't know, but whatever he's planning, I don't think he's done with you yet. That evening, I sat in my apartment trying to process everything that had happened. My small one-bedroom felt too quiet after the chaos of the day, filled with the ordinary sounds of home, the refrigerator humming, traffic passing outside the upstairs neighbor's TV, bleeding through the ceiling. I'd lived here for 4 years, ever since I'd saved enough for the deposit. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Clean white walls furniture from thrift stores and Target books arranged by subject on homemade shelves. The life of someone who followed the rules and colored inside the lines. My laptop sat open on the kitchen table, the screen glowing in the gathering darkness. I'd been researching employment law for the past 2 hours, reading about wrongful termination and corporate fraud. The legal language was dense and intimidating, but one thing was clear: if Marcus had fabricated evidence against me, it wasn't just grounds for dismissal, it was potentially criminal. My phone rang, making me jump. The caller ID showed Elena's number. "How are you holding up?" she asked without preamble. "I've been better. You, I'm at the office, officially doing weekend maintenance on the HVAC system. Unofficially." There was a pause and I could hear her typing in the background. "Sarah, you need to see this. See what Teray..." I'm in Marcus's office. His computer was still logged in sloppy security, but lucky for us. I found a folder labeled Personnel Issues. My heart started racing. "What's in it?" "Files on you, Mary David Jennifer Walsh, Tom Chen, and about 6 other people. Performance reviews that don't match what's in HR. Fabricated incident reports. Email drafts that were never sent, but detailed plans for removing each of you from the company." I sat down hard on my couch. "He's been planning this for weeks. Months, Sarah. Some of these files date back to his second week on the job. It's like he came here with a hit list. Now, can you copy the files? Already done. I'm sending everything to a secure email account right now. But there's something else. Hidden in the folder was a document titled Meridian Restructure, Phase 1. Phase 1. Apparently getting rid of the problematic employees was just the beginning. Phase 2 involves bringing in his own people for key positions. Phase 3, Sarah, he's planning to recommend that the board sell the company. The words hit me like a physical blow. Meridian Technologies had been family-owned for 25 years. Mr. Kellerman had built it from a 3-person startup into a company that employed over 200 people. The idea of selling it to some corporate vulture. Elena, if this gets out, it needs to get out. This isn't just about your job anymore. It's about everyone's job. I closed my eyes and counted breaths. 1, 2, 3. But the familiar rhythm wasn't calming anymore. It was energizing. "Well, what else do you need?" David said he'd be here around 10 to work on the email metadata. If we can prove those emails were fabricated combined with what I found in Marcus's files, we'll have enough to bury him. What can I do?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Actually, there might be something. Mary mentioned that Marcus has been having a lot of private meetings lately. Phone calls he takes in his office with the door closed. If we could figure out who he's been talking to, his phone records would be on the company account." "Exactly, and guess who has access to administrative billing information?" Mary. But she'd need a good reason to pull those records without raising suspicions. I thought about it. What if there was a discrepancy in the monthly phone bill, something that required investigation? That could work, but how do we create a discrepancy that looks legitimate? We don't create one. We find a real one. I was thinking out loud now, following a thread. "Elena, when you were looking at Marcus's expense reports, did you notice anything about his cell phone usage?" "Like what?" "Like international calls that weren't approved for business use? Or excessive data charges that don't match his approved plan?" Actually, yes. There were some unusual charges on last month's bill, but I assumed they were legitimate. Maybe they weren't. Maybe Marcus has been using his company phone for personal business. That would be a violation of policy, wouldn't it? Elena's laugh was sharp with understanding. "It would require a full audit of his phone records." "Sarah, you're brilliant. Just following the rules. Isn't that what good employees do?" After Elena hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not the passive hope that things would work out if I just kept my head down, but the active hope that comes from taking control of your own story. My laptop screensaver had kicked in, leaving the room lit only by the streetlights outside. But instead of feeling small and alone, I felt connected to something larger. Elena working late in the empty office building. Mary carefully documenting financial irregularities in her neat handwriting. David preparing to dive into server logs to find the truth hidden in digital metadata. For the first time in my career, I wasn't following someone else's rules. I was writing my own. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made the whole world look like it needed a good washing. I'd slept poorly, my dreams filled with conference rooms and corporate lawyers, and the sound of that wheezy air conditioning unit. But when I woke up, I felt clearer than I had in months. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Elena and a text, "Call me ASAP, big developments." I called while the coffee was brewing, still in my pajamas, watching rain streak down my kitchen window. "Sarah, thank God." Elena's voice was tight with excitement and exhaustion. "How soon can you get here?" Get where? My apartment. David and I worked until 3 in the morning, and what we found," she paused. "Marcus is in a lot more trouble than we thought." An hour later, I was sitting at Elena's kitchen table with a mug of coffee that could have stripped paint and a stack of printouts that painted a picture of corporate corruption, so detailed it was almost artistic. David looked like he hadn't slept at all, his usually neat hair sticking up at odd angles, and his glasses slightly crooked. But his eyes were bright with the kind of vindicated energy that comes from proving you were right about something important. "Okay," Elena said, spreading the documents across the table like she was dealing cards. "Let's start with the emails. David, our secretary." David adjusted his glasses and pulled out his laptop. "The emails Marcus used to accuse you were definitely fabricated. The metadata shows they were created Thursday night between 11:15 and 11:45 p.m., then backdated to look like they were sent weeks ago. How can you prove that? Server logs don't lie. Every email that goes through our system gets logged with a timestamp that can't be altered. The logs show no record of the emails Marcus presented to the disciplinary committee because they were never actually sent through the server." Elena leaned forward. "But here's the interesting part. Whoever created those fake emails had to have administrative access to the email system to make them look authentic. Which means Marcus has been given access he shouldn't have, or he's working with someone in IT who's helping him." David shook his head. "It's not anyone in my department. I checked. The access came from Marcus's own login credentials, but with elevated privileges that he definitely doesn't have authorization for." Supper in a room. "So how did he get them?" "That's the million-dollar question. But I've got Tom Rodriguez in security looking into it. Unofficially, of course." Elena pushed another set of documents toward me. "Now let's talk about what I found in his office files. Sarah, this goes way beyond just getting rid of a few employees." I scanned the papers, feeling my stomach drop with each page. Marcus hadn't just been planning to fire people, he'd been conducting what could only be described as corporate espionage. Employee personal information, financial records, family details, health information. All of it meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. I stopped looking for the right word. "This is insane. Why would he need to know about Jennifer Walsh's custody arrangement or Tom Chen's mortgage payments?" "Leverage," Elena said grimly. "Look at the notes in the margins. Next to Jennifer's file, he wrote, 'Custody hearing next month. Vulnerable.' Next to Tom's, 'Behind on house payments. Needs job.'" David pulled up another document on his laptop. "And this is where it gets really ugly. I found email drafts on his computer, never sent, just saved as drafts. Messages to various board members describing different employees as security risks or potential liabilities. He's been building cases against all of us. Not just building cases, building a narrative. Look at this." Elena pointed to a flowchart that looked like it belonged in a spy thriller. "He's been systematically identifying anyone who might pose a threat to his plans, then creating situations to justify removing them. But why? What's the end game?" Elena and David exchanged glances. "Show her the restructuring plan," David said quietly. The document Elena handed me was marked confidential, board eyes only. As I read, I felt the blood drain from my face. Marcus wasn't just planning to sell Meridian Technologies. He was planning to strip it down first, selling off the most valuable assets separately, then dumping what remained on a competitor for pennies on the dollar. The projections showed him personally netting nearly $2 million in consulting fees and bonuses from the process. "This would destroy the company," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It would destroy everything," Elena confirmed. "Every job, every pension, every retirement account tied to company stock. He's planning to walk away rich while 200 families lose their livelihoods." I set the document down with shaking hands. "We have to stop him." "We're going to," David said. "But we need to be smart about this. Marcus has connections on the board. and he spent the last 6 weeks positioning himself as the guy who's cleaning up the company's problems. Hmm. So what's our play? Elena smiled, and for the first time in days it reached her eyes. Mary's been busy. Tell her David. David opened a new folder on his laptop. Remember Marcus's phone records? Mary pulled them yesterday under the pretense of investigating those billing discrepancies you suggested. Turns out our COO has been having a lot of very interesting conversations. The phone logs showed dozens of calls to numbers that traced back to investment firms, consulting companies, and corporate lawyers specializing in mergers and acquisitions. All of them made during business hours using company resources for deals that would destroy the company that employed him. This is fraud, I said. It's definitely a breach of fiduciary duty, Elena agreed, and probably several kinds of securities violation. But the best part is how we present it. What do you mean? Elena gathered all the documents into neat piles. Your formal hearing is Monday morning at 9 a.m. By company policy, you're entitled to present evidence in your defense and call witnesses to testify on your behalf. I'm going to present all this at my hearing. Not just present it, we're going to walk the disciplinary committee through exactly what Marcus has been doing, step by step, document by document. By the time we're done, they're not going to be asking whether you should be fired. David closed his laptop. They're going to be asking whether Marcus should be arrested. I looked around Elena's kitchen at the evidence of corporate corruption spread across every surface, and I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood, the absolute certainty that justice was possible. When do we start preparing? Elena checked her phone. How about now? We've got 36 hours to build an airtight case, and I don't know about you, but I'm not planning to sleep much until this is over. I thought about my quiet apartment, my carefully ordered life, my belief that following the rules would keep me safe. Then I thought about 200 families whose livelihoods depended on Meridian Technologies, and about a man who was willing to destroy all of them for personal profit. Let's get to work. Sunday evening, Elena's apartment looked like a war room. Documents covered every flat surface, 3 laptops hummed with activity, and empty coffee cups formed small cities on the edges of tables. Mary had joined us around noon, bringing more financial records and a grim determination that matched our own. We'd spent the day building what Elena called the narrative, not just a collection of evidence, but a story that would walk the disciplinary committee through Marcus's deception step by logical step. The beauty of it was that we didn't need to rely on speculation or accusations. The documents spoke for themselves. Okay, Elena said, consulting a timeline we'd written on the back of a pizza box. Let's run through this one more time. Sarah, you're presenting your defense tomorrow. How do you want to structure it? I'd been thinking about this for hours. I think we start with the fabricated emails. Show that they're fake, explain how we know, then ask the obvious question, why would someone need to manufacture evidence against me? That opens the door to everything else, Mary agreed. Once they accept that Marcus lied about the emails, they have to consider that he might be lying about other things too. David looked up from his laptop where he'd been compiling the digital evidence into a single presentation. I've got everything organized chronologically. The fake emails, the unauthorized access to company systems, the personal files on employees, the phone calls to investment firms. It tells a pretty clear story. What about Marcus's expense account irregularities? I asked. Mary patted a thick folder. All documented. Dinners charged as business expenses that were clearly personal. Travel costs that don't match any approved company business. Hotel charges in cities where he was supposedly working from home. And the restructuring plan. Elena held up a USB drive, complete with financial projections showing how much money Marcus stands to make from destroying the company. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. You all realize that after tomorrow, there's no going back. If we do this, we're declaring war on Marcus Holloway. Sarah, Mary said quietly, he declared war on us first. We're just finally fighting back. Besides, Elena added, what's the alternative? Let him destroy the company and ruin everyone's lives. I've been at Meridian for 8 years. Some of my friends have been there longer. I'm not going to stand by and watch him steal their futures. David saved his work and closed the laptop. There's something else to consider. If we don't stop Marcus now, what's to prevent him from doing this again somewhere else? Guys like him don't just retire after one big score. The room fell quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows. Outside, the city was settling into Sunday evening routines, Families having dinner, people preparing for another work week, ordinary lives continuing in ordinary ways. But inside Elena's apartment, we were preparing to detonate a bomb in the middle of corporate America. "What time should we get to the office tomorrow?" I asked. "The hearing's at 9, Elena said. "But I want to be there by 7:30. Give us time to set up, make sure all the technology works, go through the presentation one more time." "What about Marcus? He's going to fight back." "Let him. We've got documentation for everything. He can argue and deflect all he wants, but he can't argue with server logs and financial records." Mary stood up and started gathering her papers. "I should get home. Big day tomorrow." "Mary," I said as she reached the door, "thank you for all of this. You didn't have to get involved." She turned back with a sad smile. "Yes, I did. My daughter just started college. My retirement account is tied up in Meridian stock. If Marcus succeeds, I lose everything I've worked for. We all do." After Mary left, Elena and David and I spent another hour going through the presentation one final time. Every document was organized, every timeline, verified, every piece of evidence cross-referenced. We'd built something that was bigger than just my wrongful suspension. We'd exposed a pattern of corporate fraud that could send Marcus Holloway to prison. "You nervous?" Elena asked as we finally called it a night. I thought about it. Strangely, no. For the first time in weeks, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, which is, Canadian one, tell the truth. Let the evidence speak. Trust that people will do the right thing when they see what really happened. David gathered his laptops and cables. "You know, when I first heard about your suspension, I figured it was just office politics. Bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. What changed your mind?" "The emails were too perfect, too obviously corrupt. It felt like someone trying too hard to make you look bad." He paused at the door. "Plus, I've worked with you for 3 years. You once returned a $20 bill you found in the copy machine. The idea that you'd take kickbacks from vendors." He shook his head. "I knew it was bullshit." After they left, I sat alone in Elena's living room, surrounded by the evidence of Marcus's corruption. The apartment felt too quiet after the organized chaos of the day, filled with the ordinary sounds of evening traffic outside a neighbor's television, the building's heating system cycling on. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Looking forward to tomorrow's hearing. Hope you're prepared. Chill." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, "More prepared than you know." The response came immediately. "We'll see about that." I turned off my phone and sat in the growing darkness, listening to the sound of my own breathing. 1, 2, 3. But the familiar rhythm felt different now. Not anxious or controlling, but steady and determined. Tomorrow I was going to walk into conference room C and destroy Marcus Holloway's career with his own words and actions. Not with speculation or accusations, but with documents he'd created, systems he'd accessed, and lies he'd told. The irony was perfect. The man who tried to destroy me with fabricated evidence was about to be brought down by real evidence he'd been careless enough to leave behind. I thought about Mr. Kellerman, retired in Florida, who'd built Meridian Technologies into something worth saving. About my coworkers who trusted that their jobs would be there tomorrow. About the families whose financial security depended on a company that one man was willing to sacrifice for personal profit. Marcus Holloway had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that people like me, quiet, rule-following, head-down employees, would never fight back. He'd counted on our compliance, our fear, our unwillingness to make waves. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made everything look sharp-edged and full of possibility. I dressed carefully, my best business suit, professional, but not overly formal, the kind of outfit that said I was taking this seriously without being intimidated by it. The Meridian Technologies building looked the same as always from the outside, but as I walked through the lobby, everything felt different. The security guard nodded at me like nothing had happened. The elevators hummed their familiar tune. The fluorescent lights buzzed with their usual electric insistence. But I wasn't the same person who'd been escorted out of here 4 days ago. Elena was already in conference room C when I arrived, setting up a laptop and arranging documents on the table with military precision. She looked up as I entered and smiled. "Irene, ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be." I set my bag down and looked around the room. The same glass table, the same uncomfortable chairs, the same air conditioning unit wheezing in the corner. But today, instead of feeling like a trap, it felt like a stage. David's in the IT department making sure we've got full network access for the presentation, Elena said. Mary's gathering the final expense reports, and Tom Rodriguez from security is standing by in case we need him. Tom's helping us. Tom's been keeping an eye on Marcus since last week. Turns out our COO has been asking some very interesting questions about building security and surveillance capabilities. The door opened and Janet from HR entered, followed by two other people I recognized, but didn't know well board members probably called in for the formal hearing. They looked serious and slightly uncomfortable, like people who'd been pulled away from more important business. "Good morning, Sarah," Janet said with professional courtesy. "Are you ready to proceed?" "Urido." "Yes." I stood up straighter. "But I should mention that I'll be presenting quite a bit of evidence today. This might take longer than you expected." The door opened again, and Marcus Holloway walked in like he owned the building, which I reflected he probably thought he did. He was dressed impeccably as always, his silk tie perfectly knotted his expression, radiating the calm confidence of someone who believed he'd already won. "Janet," he nodded to the HR director, then looked at me with what might have been sympathy. "Sarah, I'm sorry we have to do this." "So am I said quietly. "Well," Janet consulted her notes, "let's begin. This is a formal disciplinary hearing regarding allegations of vendor fraud and misconduct by Sarah Chen. Sarah, you've requested the right to present evidence in your defense. The floor is yours." I looked around the table at the five faces watching me, Janet from HR, the two board members, Marcus, with his practiced concern, and Elena sitting quietly in the corner as my employee advocate. The air conditioning wheezed once, twice, then settled into its familiar rhythm. "Thank you," I said, and my voice was steadier than I'd expected. "I'd like to start by addressing the emails that were presented as evidence against me last Thursday." I nodded to Elena, who opened her laptop and connected it to the room's presentation screen. David's carefully organized evidence appeared on the wall, clear and damning. "These emails were fabricated," I said simply. "They were created last Thursday night between 11:15 and 11:45 p.m., then backdated to appear as if they'd been sent weeks ago. I can prove this through server logs and metadata analysis." The room was dead silent. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "That's a very serious accusation," Janet said carefully. "It is. Elena, could you show them the server logs?" "Come on." For the next 10 minutes, Elena walked the committee through David's analysis with the patience of a teacher and the precision of a prosecutor. Server timestamps that couldn't be faked. Metadata that showed when the emails were actually created. Access logs that proved someone with administrative privileges had been manipulating the email system. "This is all very technical," one of the board members said when Elena finished. "But how do we know these logs haven't been manipulated as well?" "Because I'm the one who maintains the server," Elena said calmly, "and I can show you real-time access to the system, demonstrate exactly how these logs are generated, and explain why they can't be altered without leaving traces that we don't see here." Marcus finally spoke. "This is an impressive presentation, but I'm not sure what Sarah hopes to accomplish. Even if there were irregularities in how the evidence was presented, that doesn't change the underlying concerns about her conduct." "Actually," I said, "it raises a much more important question. If someone needed to fabricate evidence against me, why would they need to do that? What was the real motivation behind my suspension?" I looked directly at Marcus. "Elena, could you show them the personnel files?" And the next 20 minutes were brutal. Elena methodically presented Marcus's secret files on employees, complete with personal information that had nothing to do with job performance and everything to do with finding leverage for control. Health problems, family situations, financial difficulties, all of it cataloged and annotated with notes about vulnerability. "This is highly irregular," Janet said, her professional composure starting to crack. "Marcus, can you explain why you would need this kind of personal information about employees?" Marcus's practiced calm was beginning to fray around the edges. "Personnel management requires understanding the whole person, not just their work performance." "Understanding or exploiting?" I asked quietly. Elena clicked to the next slide. "This is where it gets interesting. Mary Santos from accounting discovered that Marcus has been using company resources to make unauthorized phone calls to investment firms and corporate lawyers. The phone records appeared on screen call by call, number by number. Elena had color-coded them red for investment firms, blue for M&A lawyers, green for consulting companies that specialized in corporate restructuring. Mary Winker and I called. Mary entered the room with a thick folder and the grim determination of someone who'd seen enough. These calls total over 40 hours of company time over the past 6 weeks, all to firms that specialize in breaking up and selling companies. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The board members were leaning forward now, their casual disinterest replaced by sharp attention. Marcus, Janet said slowly, "What business would you have with merger and acquisition specialists?" "Due diligence," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Any responsible executive explores all options for maximizing shareholder value, including selling the company without board approval," I asked. Elena clicked again, and Marcus's restructuring plan filled the screen. Phase 1, remove problematic employees. Phase 2, install loyal personnel. Phase 3, recommend sale to board. The financial projections were there in black and white, showing Marcus's personal compensation for orchestrating the destruction of Meridian Technologies. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the return vent cycling in the adjacent room. One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned back in her chair and stared at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. "Mr. Holloway," she said, in a voice that could have cut glass, "are you telling us that you've spent the last 6 weeks planning to sell this company for your personal profit?" "That's not—" "The plan was preliminary. I was just exploring options. Options that included falsifying evidence against employees who might have discovered your scheme." Marcus's composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous. You're taking the word of a disgruntled employee and her conspiracy theories over documentation that you created yourself." Elena interrupted. She clicked to the next slide, showing email drafts from Marcus's own computer. "These are messages you wrote but never sent, describing various employees as security risks and liabilities, including detailed plans for removing each of them from the company. You accessed my personal computer without authorization." "I accessed company property during routine maintenance," Elena said calmly. "Everything on that computer belongs to Meridian Technologies, not to you personally." The board member with silver hair turned to Janet. "I think we've heard enough. Janet, I want Marcus Holloway suspended immediately pending a full investigation, and I want security to escort him from the building." "That's not necessary," Marcus said, standing quickly. "I can pack my own—" "Sit down," the woman said, and her voice carried the authority of someone who'd been giving orders longer than Marcus had been alive. Tom Rodriguez from security appeared in the doorway, like he'd been waiting for his cue. "Ma'am, please escort Mr. Holloway to his office to gather his personal items, then see him out of the building. His access cards and company phone should be confiscated immediately." Marcus looked around the room like he was searching for allies, but found only cold stares and damning evidence. As Tom stepped forward, Marcus finally seemed to understand that his carefully constructed plan had collapsed completely. "This isn't over," he said, looking directly at me. "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." As the door closed behind Marcus and Tom, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The air conditioning wheezed once, then settled back into its familiar rhythm. Janet looked at me with something approaching awe. "Sarah, I owe you an apology, and I think the company owes you significantly more than that." The silver-haired board member extended her hand. "Elizabeth Morrison, board chair. Ms. Chen, on behalf of Meridian Technologies, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Your actions have saved this company and everyone who works here. I didn't do it alone," I said, looking at Elena and Mary, "and I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Elena started packing up the laptops and documents. "So what happens now?" "Now we conduct a full audit of everything Marcus touched during his time here," Elizabeth said. "We'll need to review every decision he made, every policy he implemented, every person he affected. It's going to be a lot of work." "I'll help however I can," I said. Elizabeth smiled. "Actually, I was hoping you'd say that. We're going to need someone to oversee the transition back to normal operations. Someone who understands the company, knows the systems, and has demonstrated they can be trusted with sensitive information." I felt Elena kick me under the table. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that Meridian Technologies needs a new chief operating officer. Someone who cares more about the company's mission than their own profit. Someone who follows the rules not out of fear, but out of principle." The offer hung in the air like sunlight through windows. 6 months ago, the idea of being offered an executive position would have terrified me. But sitting in conference room C, surrounded by the evidence of what ordinary people could accomplish, When they decided to fight for what was right, it felt like the natural next step. I'd be honored, I said. 3 months later, I was sitting in the same conference room for a very different kind of meeting. The air conditioning unit had been replaced with a newer, quieter model, but the view through the windows was the same, the parking lot with its sodium lights, the city skyline in the distance, the ordinary landscape of working life. The financial audit is complete. Mary reported from her new position as controller. Marcus's expense account irregularities had totaled nearly $50,000 in fraudulent charges. We've recovered most of the misappropriated funds and implemented new oversight procedures. Elena looked up from her tablet. Its security review is finished too. We've closed all the unauthorized access points Marcus created and implemented new protocols for administrative privileges. David's team deserves a lot of credit for that work. What about the legal situation? I asked. District Attorney's Office filed charges last week. Elizabeth said via video conference from the boardroom. Wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, computer crimes, and conspiracy. Marcus's lawyer is talking about a plea agreement. I nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Marcus Holloway had been a smart man who'd made terrible choices, and now he would face the consequences of those choices. There was no joy in his downfall, but there was justice. Any word from the employees he targeted? Jennifer Walsh is back in marketing and doing great work on the new client acquisition campaign, Elena reported. Tom Chen took a position with another company, but he sent a thank you note saying the experience taught him to stand up for himself. And David got the promotion to IT director that he should have received years ago. What about the company sale? Elizabeth's expression grew serious. The board voted unanimously to remove that option from consideration. Meridian Technologies will remain independent and employee-focused. That's not changing. As the meeting wound down and people began filing out, I found myself alone in the conference room where this whole story had begun. The familiar sounds of office life surrounded me. Keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the distant hum of productive work. But everything felt different now, like I was seeing it all through new eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard about your promotion. Well-deserved. MH. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations were over. Elena appeared in the doorway. How does it feel? How does what feel? Being the COO, running the company, winning. I thought about it. It feels like responsibility, like opportunity, like the chance to build something better. Not like victory, Victory would be if none of this had been necessary. If Marcus had chosen to be a good leader instead of a corrupt one. If people didn't have to fight just to keep their jobs and their dignity. I stood up and gathered my papers. This feels more like restoration. Restoration, getting back to what Meridian was supposed to be. A place where people could do good work, support their families, and trust that their efforts would be valued. Elena smiled. You know, for someone who used to count breaths when she got nervous, you've gotten pretty comfortable with making big decisions. I still count breaths, I admitted. But now it's not about controlling anxiety. It's about finding clarity. As we walked out of the conference room together, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Professional, confident, purposeful. The person looking back at me was someone I recognized but hadn't fully met until recently. Someone who understood that following the rules wasn't about avoiding conflict, but about creating the kind of world where fairness and integrity actually mattered. The air conditioning's gentle hum followed us down the hallway, no longer wheezy or labored, but steady and reliable. Like everything else at Meridian Technologies, it had been fixed, improved, and put back to work serving the people who depended on it. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about what would happen next. I was looking forward to it.